"What are you drawing?" Grandma asked as she approached me. I was absorbed in drawing using a red pencil. "I'm drawing the birthday cake we ate together," I said proudly as I finished drawing a glossy red strawberry and showed it to Grandma. In front of me there was a lavish cake, surrounded by familiar images of Grandma and friends. A happy smile spread across my face, and Grandma squinted her eyes, smiling gently. "Nadine, your drawing is very good." "You're like a professional painter," Grandma said, patting my head warmly. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of her hand and the happiness it brought. I love my grandma deeply. Even with little affection from my parents, the warmth of Grandma's hand was enough to keep me going. My name is Nadine, and I'm 28 years old. I love to draw and read books. During the day, I work as an office clerk at a small company, and at night, I write in my diary or draw comics, posting them on my blog and Instagram. I illustrate small daily life events in a humorous way, always trying to end on a positive note, even if I fail. As I do this, I can stay positive about my real life too. I'm so happy when people resonate with my posts and leave comments or likes. My proactive approach to life is also influenced by the environment I grew up in. I remember a story about a famous writer who was approached by a beautiful actress. "Wouldn't it be wonderful if a baby was born with your intellect and my looks?" the actress said. The writer replied, "The child might end up with your intellect and my looks though." The actress had hoped for a sister, but the writer had warned of me. My father works for a major company in LA. My mother was once a beauty pageant star. I've inherited my father's looks and my mother's intellect, along with their complexes. Relatives often say, "You have your father's nose," or "Your mother wasn't good at studying either." These words irritated my parents, so I gradually became treated as a disappointment. On the other hand, my younger sister Flora, 3 years my junior, was known in our community for her cuteness and intelligence. She charmed adults with her clear eyes, high nose bridge, fair skin, and smooth hair. She was loved like an angel, and everyone adored her, calling her cute. Our parents also loved her deeply as the ideal daughter, lavishing her with affection as if to affirm their love. Flora, meanwhile, learned to turn their love towards herself by cleverly casting me as the villain. When a dish was broken, she would say, "Nadine dropped it." When she neglected her practice lessons, the excuse was, "Nadine stopped me." When money was missing from Mother's purse, she would claim it was under Nadine's instruction. I was always the one to bear the consequences of her actions. Despite the falsehoods, our parents always blamed me and held me accountable. They accepted the false narrative of me, jealous of my excellent sister, bullying her without question. Living in this house felt like hell. Yet I managed not to fall into despair thanks to the kindness of friends and my father's mother. Especially my nearby grandmother always warmly welcomed me whenever I was driven out of our house. Grandma repeatedly cautioned my parents, but when my mother vehemently argued back, blaming Grandma, I had no choice but to mediate, saying, "It's okay, it's my fault." This situation visibly angered my parents, and Grandma showed a sad expression. Instead, she poured deep affection into me, spoiling me greatly. Once, while Grandma was folding laundry, she saw a drawing I made on the back of a flyer and praised me. "Nadine, you have a talent for drawing," and gifted me high-quality drawing paper and a set of 36 colored pencils. For my birthday, when they didn't celebrate for me, Grandma prepared a huge whole cake. "We can't eat all of this by ourselves," she said with a laugh, and also invited friends. At Grandma's house, enjoying hamburgers and a rich cream cake, and opening gifts from friends, that moment of happiness was something I will never forget. My parents were aware that I frequently stayed at Grandma's house. Initially, they were angry, saying, "A child spoiled by her grandmother won't grow up to be a good adult." But they quieted down as I reached the upper grades of elementary school. They focused on perfecting Flora, completely losing interest in me. The harsh treatment towards me ceased, and they began to ignore my presence as if I had never existed from the start. Only the bare essentials for living were provided, and that was all. By the time I became a middle school student, I realized that my parents no longer cared about me. Still, I hadn't completely given up hope, but when I was told coldly in my 3rd year of middle school, "We can't afford your school fees because your sister needs to take entrance exams," I finally gave up on receiving any love from them. Despite my father working at a major corporation and being fully capable of affording my tuition, when Grandma heard this, she was so furious she seemed about to burst a blood vessel and suggested, "I'll pay for your schooling. You should come and live with me and go to high school." I intended to refuse, feeling sorry, but when I saw Grandma crying, saying, "Poor Nadine," I couldn't stop my own tears and hugged her. Later, with the help of my homeroom teacher, I took the exams without my parents knowing and was able to enter a nighttime high school. I left home to start a new life at Grandma's house, working part-time during the day and going to high school in the evenings. Grandma said I didn't need to work, but I wanted to earn at least my own living expenses. After graduating high school, I left Grandma's house and found a job as an office clerk at a small company in the neighboring prefecture, where I continue to work. I gave my parents my address, but they neither visited nor sent letters. We became completely estranged, even during Christmas. However, I finally managed to become independent and leave that house. I have always lived looking forward. Then one day I received a letter from my sister for the first time. Inside the fancy envelope was an invitation to my sister's wedding. My sister, 25 years old, and having barely seen her since middle school graduation, seemed to be marrying a high-earning man, much like our father, capitalizing on our mother's beauty. Reuniting with such a family was painful, but I was the only sister she had. If I didn't attend, it might raise suspicions in her in-law's family. I have been working as a professional for 10 years now. Even though I am not the perfect daughter my parents envisioned, showing that I am living a decent life might improve our relationship, even if slightly. I will attend my sister's wedding after 10 years of estrangement, I casually posted on my blog, and received heartwarming comments from my followers. With courage, I marked "will attend" on the invitation. The day of my sister Flora's wedding finally arrived. As the bride's sister who must not be late, I drove early to the venue. The venue was an enchanting building modeled after a castle in a theme park, like something out of a fairy tale. Guided by the staff, I entered a room reserved for family. There were my aged parents and my beautiful sister, already dressed in her wedding gown. Flora. Overwhelmed, I barely managed a greeting. They looked at each other and said, "See, Mom? I told you she would definitely come." What I was taken aback by my sister's words. Mother exaggeratedly shrugged her shoulders, like a character from a cartoon. "To think you'd show up at your sister's wedding after dropping out of middle school is beyond me." "What do you mean? You really haven't changed, still so thoughtless." Father, his hair thinned, looked at me with an expression of surprise. Even though I expected to be considered a nuisance by my family, I hadn't expected such a clear and harsh response. It was unjust to be criticized as insensitive just for attending my sister's wedding. "Flora, you sent the invitation, didn't you?" I asked cautiously. She smiled and frowned slightly. "Yes, I sent it. But even someone like you is family, so how could I not invite you?" Her usual sharp tone was there, but this was not the time for it. "So why do you resent me being here? Did you actually want me to come?" Pointing out the contradiction, my sister touched her cheek and tilted her head. "Actually, that was true. But recently I realized it would be better to pretend you no longer exist than to invite you and have everyone ridicule your lack of education." "What?" "I realized it just a month ago. I meant to tell you, but then today arrived." "What does that mean? You behave as if I no longer exist, and you even find it troublesome to tell me?" Shocked by this incredible fact, my mother's piercing gaze stabbed through me. "It can't be helped. You have no experience with marriage, nor a likely partner, so you might not understand, but preparing a wedding is very hectic. Also, since we didn't actually think you'd come, I told Flora she won't come if she understands her place personally. If I were in your shoes, I wouldn't have the courage to attend a wedding. It would be too embarrassing, right? Mother said with an unnatural laugh. Don't say such sad things, Mom. I always believed my sister would come. We wanted her to feel recognized and loved as part of the family, that she's needed. What are you talking about? I'm sorry for giving you false hope. But don't worry, we'll remember you as the kind sister who passed away early from a brain disease, Flora said. She looked at me with pity. It's impossible that a lie made up so suddenly would be believed by our relatives and your husband. Don't worry. You haven't been in contact with our relatives for a long time, right? It's a well-known fact that you were isolated within the family. And I told them she wanted us to have a quiet funeral without overshadowing my wedding, only with the family. So there won't be any further questions. I've told my husband as well. He believes whatever I say. What a thing to do. Indeed, since graduating from middle school, I had barely met anyone other than Grandma. There were relatives who worried about me, but that was 10 years ago. If they were told I had died, they would believe it without doubt. At that moment, as I stood there dazed, my father threw something at me. It was the seating chart for the wedding. Take a look at this. Flora is marrying into a family of doctors. We can't introduce someone like you at such an event. I quietly opened the document and saw many names associated with doctor on the groom's side. Take it as a keepsake and leave quickly. You no longer exist in this world. Ha ha ha. At that moment, I heard my father's voice filled with disdain, along with the laughter of my sister Flora and my mother. Feeling dizzy, I rushed out of the venue. I hurried to my car and tried to start the engine with trembling fingers. However, I couldn't properly transmit strength to my hands. Tears flowed one after another, a mix of sadness, irritation, and hatred. It felt like a palette where dark colors of paint were chaotically mixed, reflecting my disordered state of mind. Knowing they would never change, I couldn't stop feeling pathetic and irritated at myself for having hoped. I vaguely watched people heading to the venue through the glass. Knowing I should not be here, I couldn't move my heavy body. Then, suddenly, my smartphone vibrated in my bag. As my hands grew cold, I took it out and saw a notification for a comment on Instagram. Because I had posted about attending my estranged sister's wedding yesterday, there were comments of concern and encouragement from friends and followers. Moved by their warm words, I used the story feature for the first time and shared my vulnerability. My family has declared me dead. It seems I have no reason to live anymore. As I typed, tears flowed incessantly. Soon after, another notification for a new message sounded. Encouraging words kept coming in. Nadine, you are not worthless. Nadine, I love your illustrated diary and your warm personality. I have been helped by Nadine's diary entries. Cut ties with such a family, Nadine. These were all words of anger and sadness from people I didn't know, who were speaking out for me. I had completely lost my confidence, but these words gradually began to sink into my heart. Then, apparently having seen my Instagram, my best friend called me crying. Nadine, hold on. Such an obvious lie can't be sustained forever. Act with confidence for your grandmother who cares so much about you. With these words, I suddenly came back to myself. For my grandmother, who cries, gets angry, and laughs for me. She must be at this wedding venue, without a doubt. Just thinking about how sad my grandmother would be if she heard I had died stirred up anger inside me. I am not a worthless person. I am not someone who should be ashamed of being alive. The ones who should be ashamed are those who scorn someone trying hard to live. I took a handkerchief from my pocket and firmly wiped my tears. Then I straightened my eyeliner and quietly opened the car door. When I returned to the venue, the reception had already started. I secretly peered inside through the glass. It seemed that a slideshow of the bride and groom's growing up was currently being shown. The slideshow included photos of our family, including me, and at the end of the presentation, the host mentioned the story of the bride's sister, who passed away from an illness a few months ago. This caused a stir among the relatives, and everyone turned to look at my parents. My father stood up and said Flora's sister died suddenly of a brain disorder. She was very kind, and she got along well with Flora, but was worried that her own illness might delay her sister's wedding. Next to him, my mother was pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. I couldn't believe that they could lie so boldly about me, whom they had just been talking with. The guests were unable to hide their astonishment as my father, with tears streaming down his face, said, "She must be happy in heaven." "Excuse me, do you have any business here?" a staff member approached me, asking with a tense expression. When I answered, "Actually, my sister asked me to do this surprise." "Are you referring to the bride as your sister?" the staff member asked with a puzzled look. I smiled and responded, "Yes, that's right," and firmly opened the doors to the venue. The moment I entered through a door near the family seats at the back where the bride's father was sitting, all eyes immediately turned to me. Feeling overwhelmed by all the gazes, I recalled the words of encouragement from my friend and regained my composure. My parents, unaware of my presence, continued to spin their fabricated tales about me. Only my sister, seated at the high table, noticed me and hurriedly stood up. Before Flora could say anything, I raised my voice louder than ever before. "I am Nadine, the bride's sister." It took me a while to get back. Yes, hell was quite warm. I sweated a lot. The venue fell silent instantly with my greeting. Oops, my mistake. Not hell, I was in heaven, right? It was a brain disease, wasn't it? I tilted my head and joked, although my heart was pounding hard. As the venue froze in shock at the bizarre situation, my sister was the first to recover. "Who are you?" "My beloved sister is no longer in this world. How dare you make such a cruel joke? Someone, get this person out of here!" Flora yelled from the high table. It seemed they were trying to expel me before I was noticed. However, cries of surprise soon erupted around me. "Nadine. Is that Nadine?" Grandma slowly stood up and walked towards me, staggering. "Nadine, is it really you, Nadine?" "Oh, I'm so relieved. I couldn't believe it when they said you had died." Grandma's hands trembled as she grasped the edge of my dress. I firmly grasped her hand in return. "Grandma, it's me, Nadine. Your beloved Nadine." "Oh, Nadine, thank you." I immediately wrapped my arms around her to steady my staggering grandmother. My father's sister, who always looks after Grandma, hurried over. "Nadine, are you really okay? You're not ill?" While supporting Grandma, I looked at my aunt's worried face and nodded slightly. After handing Grandma over to my aunt, I scanned the venue again. The groom's side of the room was noisy, and the groom himself looked shocked. The bride's side was also disturbed, but especially my sister and parents looked pale. Straightening the wrinkles in my dress, I gathered my courage and began to speak boldly. "Thank you all for gathering here today. I apologize for the inconvenience at such a celebratory occasion. I am Nadine, the bride's sister. In fact, I was supposed to attend today, but my sister and parents told me to leave, because we're going to tell everyone you suddenly passed away." The room grew even noisier. "I hope you can understand my desire not to shock my beloved grandmother," Nadine Grandma whispered in a hoarse voice. "I was denied by my own family because I could not live up to their expectations. From a young age, I was constantly compared to my sister and discriminated against for my appearance and abilities." Wait a minute. My father was visibly shaken by my disclosure. However, I ignored his reaction and continued. "My sister, perhaps influenced by our parents, or maybe it's just her nature, always made me out to be the villain, monopolizing their affection. Whenever she caused any trouble, the blame was always shifted to me." "That's not true." My sister interrupted my statement. As the attention shifted to her, She began to tremble and tears started to flow. Ladies and gentlemen, it's embarrassing to say, but my sister has a habit of lying. This caused me to hesitate to invite her to the wedding, and I ended up falsely claiming she had died. I apologize for that lie. Flora. The groom, confused but supportive, stood by my sister. Amid the confusion, with attendees unsure of whom to believe, it was Grandma who changed the atmosphere of the room. How disgraceful her strong, deep voice resonated throughout the venue. You have always bullied Nadine. Do you even have a human heart? But Grandma, don't make excuses. It's disgraceful. Don't shame us further. Under Grandma's stern rebuke, my sister trembled. I'm leaving now. I didn't want to attend this ceremony originally, but I came because I thought Nadine would be here. I should not have come to such a pitiful event. Nadine, let's go home. Grandma warmly grasped my hand. I wanted to say more, but the warmth of her hand soothed my heart. Yes, let's go home. As we were leaving the venue, I heard my mother making a clumsy excuse. Flora's grandmother has been getting a bit forgetful. I quickly closed the door behind us to shut out her words. Nadine, come to my house tonight. I'll make your favorite donuts, Grandma said gently as she stroked my hand. Yes, thank you, Grandma. Relieved by her words, I clung to Grandma and cried. Shortly after, all the relatives on my father's side left the venue. They were fed up with my sister and parents' reprehensible actions and had lost all desire to celebrate. Nadine, I'm sorry. I knew you were being treated harshly but couldn't intervene in family matters. I should have supported you more, my aunt apologized tearfully. As I comforted her, stroking her back while she cried, I understood that it's hard to interject in another family's affairs. Ultimately, I left the venue with my father's family. I hadn't told everything to my parents, but I felt proud that I had faced the situation head-on without running away. While relaxing and enjoying donuts at Grandma's house, chaos ensued back at the wedding venue. My sister and parents argued to the groom's side that I was an uncontrollable person and that Grandma was experiencing cognitive decline. However, since a large part of my father's family had already left the ceremony in protest, few believed their claims. Their repeated excuses only deepened the bad impression, and many guests left the venue one after another. During this, the groom stood by dumbfounded, while his parents apologized to the remaining guests and encouraged them to head home. Visibly angry, my sister and my ever-changing parents declared, "We will recheck the facts and consult with the appropriate authorities if necessary before leaving the scene." As the venue emptied, my sister and parents showed no signs of self-reflection under the watchful eyes of the staff. Blinded by their misconceptions about me, they angrily headed to my apartment in the neighboring state where I live. But at that time, I was leisurely enjoying donuts at Grandma's house, soaking in a warm bath, so I wasn't home. My father, frustrated that the door wouldn't open, kicked it, and my sister picked up stones from around and shattered the windows. A concerned neighbor thought the disturbance was suspicious and called the police, resulting in the arrest of my parents and sister on the spot. Shocked by the call from the police and the landlord's story, I was reassured by the landlord's sympathy, who encouraged me, saying, "You are a decent person. This is just unfortunate." After explaining the circumstances behind my family's actions to the police, they sympathized and recommended that I stay with relatives for my safety. Later, I met with the family that was supposed to become my sisters-in-laws and apologized for the chaos at the wedding. I offered to pay compensation, but they refused, saying, "You have suffered as much as us." The truth about her came out before the marriage, which is fortunate, said the man who was supposed to be her husband, showing a helpless smile. He had contacted a detective agency immediately after the wedding to investigate my sister's past. The investigation revealed numerous falsehoods spun by my sister and parents. One such lie was that my sister attended a prestigious university and graduated, which I had also believed. However, I was surprised to learn that she had dropped out after 2 years because she tried to get close to a married professor for better grades and was subsequently sued by his wife. She boasted about working at a large corporation, but in reality, she was only working part-time at a convenience store inside the company's building. Flora, even while working part-time, got close to a married man who visited her workplace and was sued again by the man's wife. After losing her job, she met the groom. He quickly took a liking to Flora and was not concerned about her educational or employment history. The groom's parents were not fixated on a profession as a doctor and accepted their son's choice of partner. However, Flora's lies were eventually exposed, leading to the annulment of the engagement, and she was told to never come near again. Flora and our parents were left with the bills for 2 previous lawsuits, the wedding, honeymoon, and a new home. Additionally, there were repairs needed for my apartment. Faced with a total claim of about $100,000, they sought help but were rebuffed by my father's relatives and mocked by my mother's relatives who said, "We cannot lend such a large amount to a liar." My parents and Flora continued to blame me repeatedly. They called me ungrateful and labeled me a failure. I am not afraid of my family who recklessly shouts to take responsibility for ruining their lives. The child who once cried, wanting to be loved as part of the family, no longer exists. When my father, veins bulging on his forehead, yelled about suing and demanded that I take responsibility to solve it if I did not want to pay, I calmly asked him, specifically, how? He reacted. "Exactly how do you intend to sue me?" I continued. "Well, that's," he stammered, and my mother and Flora tried to speak, but no words came out. "How can you sue someone who you ignored as a child and treated as dead as an adult?" I challenged. They were speechless. "Perhaps I should be the one to sue. Do you want me to increase the compensation?" I pressed further, and they choked on their words in frustration. Whether they will actually sue remains uncertain, but it likely serves as a deterrent. The broken engagement and police incident caused by my family's misbehavior are now widely known at my father's workplace, threatening his professional status. The people who once drove me to utter fear were now merely foolish and pitiable figures to me. It was not time that resolved the issues, but rather that their values became relative as I grew up, and they no longer had any effect on me. My family stopped seeing me merely as a source of money when they nearly depleted their savings for retirement. It was a bitter choice for them, and an unavoidable action. At one time, my sister Flora, whom my parents were proud of, now had a tarnished reputation and was shunned by society. The way my parents were baffled by her behavior clearly shows how vain their expectations were. Once the center of her own world, seemingly stable in her self-centeredness, her foundation had crumbled, and her temperament had become rough and unstable. If they could honestly acknowledge their mistakes and sincerely attempt to improve, there might still be a chance for them to start over. However, it is highly doubtful that they can develop such humility. In these challenging circumstances, I have made the decision to take a new step in my life. I quit my job and moved to a tranquil rural town with my beloved grandmother. In this town, I found a job at a small but warm company, and I live a peaceful and fulfilling life with my grandmother. Our serene life, shared through blog and Instagram posts as an illustrated diary, has gradually gained attention. Many people comment that they find healing in the cozy daily life with my grandmother, and I have amassed tens of thousands of followers. There is also talk of publishing the diary, and I live my days in a dreamlike state due to these unexpected developments. "Your drawings really warm my heart," my grandmother said, stroking my head with her unchanged warm hand as she used to. While gaining social recognition was gratifying, seeing my grandmother smile is my greatest joy. I am deeply grateful to be able to share this happiness. I truly feel fortunate to have been born into this life.